Hello, everyone, and welcome to Learn English with Sara. Today, we begin a special story in our Learn English Through Story series. In this video, you will not only practice English through listening and reading, but you will also discover a powerful life story that carries a deep lesson about change, responsibility, and purpose. So, relax, listen carefully, and let this story inspire you while improving your English. Now, let's begin. Alfred was born on a cold October morning in 1833 in Stockholm, Sweden. He came into a family that, while not wealthy, was filled with creativity, ambition, and resilience. His father, Emanuel, was an engineer and inventor, a man who believed machines could shape the future. His mother, Andrietta, was practical, intelligent, and determined. When the family faced poverty, it was she who opened a small grocery business to support her children. From her, Alfred learned strength and quiet courage. From his father, he learned the beauty of science. When Alfred was just 9 years old, his father left Sweden to find work in Russia, where industry was growing rapidly. For 2 long years, the family lived apart, struggling to make ends meet. Then, news arrived. His father had succeeded. He had opened a workshop in St. Petersburg, repairing machinery for the Russian army. Finally, the rest of the family joined him there. Life suddenly transformed. From small rooms and simple meals, the Nobels moved to a busy city bursting with opportunity. Because the family business was improving, Alfred did not attend a regular school. Instead, he was educated at home by private teachers. Though shy and quiet, he showed early signs of brilliance. He developed a love for reading and spent hours studying literature, philosophy, and poetry. He also became fascinated by chemistry, the mysterious science of matter and transformation. By the age of 17, Alfred could speak Swedish, Russian, French, English, and German. He once said that learning languages made him feel like he could travel the world without leaving his room. Despite the family's new success, Alfred's father worried that his son was becoming too dreamy, too interested in poetry, and not enough in business. Determined to give Alfred a more practical education, he sent him on a journey across Europe to study engineering and industrial chemistry. This journey would change Alfred's life forever. In Paris, Alfred worked in the private laboratory of a famous French chemist. There he met a young Italian scientist named Ascanio Sobrero. Years earlier, Sobrero had created a powerful liquid explosive called nitroglycerin. But it was extremely dangerous. Even the smallest shake could make it explode. Sobrero warned Alfred never to use it. It was too violent, too unpredictable, too deadly. But Alfred was intrigued by its power. He believed that explosives were not evil by themselves. They could be used to build bridges, railways, tunnels, structures that connected people and improved life. To Alfred, it wasn't nitroglycerin that was dangerous. It was the lack of control. If he could tame it, make it safe, then it would become a tool of progress, not destruction. That idea became his obsession. But fate had a cruel lesson waiting for him. When Alfred returned to Sweden after his father's business in Russia collapsed, he continued his experiments with nitroglycerin. He worked in a small wooden laboratory near Stockholm with his brother Emil and several assistants. They mixed chemicals in metal bowls and tested different ways to stabilize explosive compounds. The neighbors often complained about the loud bangs that came from the workshop, but Alfred ignored them. He believed he was close to a breakthrough. Then tragedy struck. One morning in 1864, the laboratory exploded with a roar that could be heard across the city. The windows of nearby houses shattered. Smoke rose into the sky like a dark ghost. When rescue workers searched the ruins, they found the lifeless body of Emil, Alfred's younger brother. Several workers had also been killed. It was a horror Alfred would never forget. The explosion could have destroyed his will. It could have broken him completely. But instead, the tragedy hardened his resolve. Alfred blamed himself not only for the accident but also for failing to make nitroglycerin safe before using it in experiments. He refused to quit. Instead, he became determined to keep going, not to prove his genius, but to make sure no one else would have to suffer the same loss. People around him called him reckless. Newspapers wrote angry articles demanding that his experiments be banned. But Alfred believed that even painful progress was still progress. He worked alone, late into the night, surrounded by silence and chemical fumes. The world saw him as a danger. They didn't know he would soon create something that would change the entire world. And yet, when he finally made his discovery, he would learn something life would never let him forget. The power to create is also the power to destroy. After the terrible explosion that took the life of his younger brother, Alfred's world changed forever. Grief became a quiet shadow that followed him every day. He spoke little, worked constantly, and avoided emotional conversations. Some believed he had become cold, but in truth, he carried a deep and silent pain, a burden he chose to transform into purpose. He no longer pursued invention for glory or money. He pursued it to make his brother's death mean something. Because nitroglycerin was banned within city limits after the explosion, Alfred moved his experiments onto a small barge anchored in the middle of a lake outside Stockholm. There, in isolation, he worked patiently, searching for a way to control the explosive power that had destroyed his family. He tested hundreds of materials: clay, chalk, sawdust, paper pulp. None could absorb the violent liquid without either weakening it or making it dangerously unstable. Still, he refused to give up. He once wrote in his diary that progress was like walking through fire. Only those willing to be burned would arrive at the other side. Then one day, a box arrived from Germany. Inside it was a strange, soft, sand-like material called diatomaceous earth. It was a natural substance formed from microscopic fossil shells. Curious. Alfred mixed the powder with nitroglycerin, and something incredible happened. The liquid absorbed evenly into the material, forming a stable paste. For the first time, nitroglycerin could be shaped, moved, and transported safely. It could still explode, but only if triggered. Alfred had found a way to control destruction. Now he needed a way to release the energy at the right moment. So he invented a blasting cap, a small device that allowed explosions to be set off using a simple fuse. When he combined the paste and the detonator, he created something entirely new. He called it dynamite, from the Greek word dynamis, meaning power. But to Alfred, it was more than power. It was hope. It was precision. It was progress. He had taken something wild and dangerous and turned it into something useful. By 1867, Alfred had secured patents across Europe. He opened factories in Germany, Britain, and Sweden. Engineers began using dynamite to carve railways through mountains, build tunnels under rivers, and mine deep into the earth for coal and metal. Roads were built where once there had been cliffs. Cities expanded, nations grew. The world was entering an age of industry, and dynamite was at the center of it. For the first time, humankind could reshape nature on a massive scale. But with success came criticism. Newspapers praised Alfred as a genius, yet others accused him of making something that would bring more death to the world. Personal attacks did not bother him, but he was haunted by a different fear, the fear that one day his invention would be used not for building, but for killing. That day came sooner than he expected. During political conflicts and wars, soldiers began using dynamite. It was not Alfred's intention. He had never designed it as a weapon. He had imagined it blowing mountains apart, not men, heartbroken. He wrote privately to a friend that he struggled to understand the human heart. Why, he wondered, do people use tools meant for progress to create suffering? The world, however, did not care about his intentions. They cared only about results. And so they gave him a name he would come to hate: the Merchant of Death. In public, Alfred ignored the criticism. In private, he wrestled with questions of morality. Could an invention be good or evil? Or was it people who chose how to use it? As his business continued to grow, He became wealthier than he had ever imagined. Yet the more money he earned, the more isolated he felt. He never married. He moved from city to city, living in rented rooms, always close to his laboratories. His friends were few. Loneliness became his silent companion. Despite his wealth, Alfred lived simply. He avoided fancy clothing, rarely attended parties, and disliked being recognized. He cared little for conversation that did not involve science or literature. The only luxury he allowed himself was books. He collected thousands of them and carried a personal library wherever he went, even late at night, after long hours in the laboratory. He read poetry. His favorite writer was Lord Byron. Perhaps poetry offered him comfort in ways that science could not. But no matter how many successes he achieved, doubt followed him. He began to wonder what his life truly meant. Would people remember his inventions or the destruction caused using them? Would his name be spoken with respect or with blame? He wrote in another note that he wished to leave the world better than he found it, yet he had no idea how to do that. For now, dynamite defined him. And then, one morning in 1888, everything changed. Alfred woke up in his home in Paris and opened the newspaper. His eyes froze when he saw the headline, "The Merchant of Death is Dead." Beneath it was a long article criticizing a man who had made it possible to kill more people faster than ever before. But the article contained a mistake. It was not Alfred who had died. It was his older brother, Ludwig. The newspaper had confused the brothers and printed Alfred's obituary while he was still alive. It was a moment of brutal honesty. It was also a moment of awakening. For the first time, Alfred saw exactly how the world would remember him, and he decided he could not accept that. What he did next would transform his legacy forever. The newspaper headline haunted Alfred for days. He read it again and again, unable to escape the harsh truth written about him. He had not died, yet the world had already judged him. They did not see a scientist, a thinker, or a dreamer. They saw a man who profited from death, alone in his silent study. Alfred folded the newspaper and placed it in his desk drawer. He did not throw it away. He kept it because it reminded him of something he could no longer ignore. He had built a life of inventions, factories, and patents, but he had not built a legacy he could be proud of. The article forced him to confront a question he had avoided his entire life. What will I leave behind when I die? For a man who had spent so many years working with explosives, he suddenly realized how fragile life truly was, how quickly it could end, how easily a name could be forgotten or stained forever. That night, he wrote in his journal that he did not fear death, but he feared being remembered for the wrong reasons. He wanted to be remembered not for causing destruction, but for helping humanity. So he made a decision that would shock the world. He decided to rewrite his will. At that time, Alfred had no wife and no children to inherit his vast fortune. He had built over 90 factories in more than 20 countries and owned hundreds of patents. His wealth was estimated to be enormous, worth many millions in today's money. Relatives expected to inherit everything. Business rivals hoped to buy his empire. But Alfred had something else in mind, something no one could have predicted. In 1895, Alfred visited the Swedish-Norwegian Club in Paris to sign his final will. Those who saw him that day said he looked calm, almost peaceful, as if he had finally made sense of his life. The document he signed was short, only 1 page, but its impact would reach across centuries. In it, he wrote that the bulk of his fortune should be placed in a fund. The interest from that fund would be given every year to men and women who had done the greatest service to humankind. He named 5 fields in which the prizes should be given: physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and peace. For peace, he wrote that the prize should go to the person who worked most effectively to unite nations, reduce standing armies, or promote peace agreements. He made sure the awards would be international, not limited to Sweden. Talent. He believed did not belong to one nation, it belonged to the world. When his will became public after his death, chaos erupted. His relatives were furious. They accused him of betrayal. Lawyers tried to challenge the will in court. Some governments opposed it because they believed the Peace Prize could become a political weapon. Even newspapers criticized him again, this time for being unrealistic. They said his idealism was foolish, that people would always fight wars, that money could not change human nature. But Alfred Nobel had already seen life from the inside out. He understood that power and fortune were meaningless if one's soul was empty. He had lived with regret and carried guilt. Now he had chosen a different path. He did not want to be remembered as the merchant of death. He wanted to be remembered as the guardian of peace. Before his death, Alfred wrote a final message: "I wish to create a fund that rewards those who serve humanity." These words were simple, but they revealed who he truly was, not a cold businessman, but a man searching for meaning and redemption. Alfred died on December 10, 1896, alone in his home in San Remo, Italy. He had suffered from heart problems for years, and doctors believed the stress of his work had worn him down. He was 63 years old. When the news reached Sweden, people were stunned not by his death, but by what he had left behind. His estate was enormous, over 30 million Swedish kroner, equal to hundreds of millions of dollars today, and almost all of it had been given away. For months, lawyers, scholars, and bankers debated how to carry out his wishes. Some believed the will would never be honored, but Alfred had prepared carefully, with the help of loyal friends, including a lawyer named Ragnar Solman. The Nobel Foundation was finally established. Its purpose was clear: to manage Alfred's fortune and to present the Nobel Prizes every year. Then came the historic moment. On December 10, 1901, exactly 5 years after Alfred's death, the first Nobel Prizes were awarded. Ceremonies were held in Stockholm, Sweden, and Oslo, Norway, just as Alfred had instructed. The world witnessed something extraordinary that day, not the celebration of wealth or power, but the celebration of human achievement and hope. Alfred Nobel had changed his story. He had changed how the world remembered him, and he had proven something incredibly powerful: that it is never too late to choose a different legacy. But this story is not just about one man's transformation. It is also about what happened next, how the Nobel Prize continued to grow, how it shaped history, and how it became the most respected award in the world. The Nobel Prizes did not simply honor genius, they celebrated purpose, from the very beginning. Alfred Nobel's final gift to the world was meant to shine a light on people who used their knowledge to improve life. As the first ceremony took place on December 10, 1901, audiences watched with quiet awe. The prizes were not handed to kings or wealthy nobles. They were awarded to thinkers, scientists, doctors, and writers, people driven by curiosity and compassion rather than ambition or wealth. For the first time in history, the world recognized achievement not by birth or status, but by contributions to humanity. In Stockholm, the first Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to Wilhelm Röntgen, the man who discovered X-rays. His work allowed doctors to see inside the human body without surgery, something that had once been impossible. In chemistry, the prize went to Jacobus van 't Hoff for his groundbreaking work in chemical dynamics. In medicine, Emil von Behring was honored for creating a treatment for diphtheria, a disease that killed countless children across Europe at the time. In literature, the French poet Sully Prudhomme received the prize for his poetry that explored the emotions of the human spirit. And in Oslo, the first Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Henri Dunant, the founder of the Red Cross, and Frédéric Passy, a leader in the peace movement. As the world listened to their speeches, something remarkable happened. Hope became part of history. The Nobel Prize was no longer just the idea of one man. It had become a mission shared by the world to honor knowledge, courage, and the belief that humanity could rise beyond conflict. Over the decades that followed, the Nobel Prize grew in influence and respect. The ceremony became a global event held every year on December 10th, the anniversary of Alfred Nobel's death. In Stockholm, prize winners walked into the grand concert hall wearing elegant, formal clothing. They bowed before the King of Sweden as he presented them their medals and diplomas. Meanwhile, in Oslo, the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony was held in the presence of the Norwegian royal family. The traditions were formal and beautiful, yet the heart of the prize remained simple: recognize excellence, reward sacrifice, and inspire progress. The designs of the Nobel Prize medals themselves held meaning. Each medal carried Alfred Nobel's face, along with the words, "For the benefit of mankind." For the Peace Prize, given in Norway, a different design showed two figures clasping hands, a symbol of unity. Along with the medal, each laureate received a diploma written by hand in exquisite calligraphy and a significant financial award to support their work. But most laureates said the true reward was not the money. It was the honor of being counted among those who had shaped the future. Through the years, Nobel Prizes began to mark defining moments in history. When Marie Curie won her first prize in physics in 1903, she became the first woman in history to receive a Nobel Prize. Later, she won a second in chemistry, becoming the only person ever to win Nobel Prizes in two different sciences. In 1921, Albert Einstein received the Nobel Prize not for his famous theory of relativity, but for his explanation of the photoelectric effect, which helped launch modern physics. In 1954, Ernest Hemingway received the prize in literature. In 1964, Martin Luther King Jr. was honored with the Nobel Peace Prize for his leadership in the non-violent struggle for civil rights. The world watched these individuals walk across the stage and felt inspired to believe that ideas could change the world. The Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences was added later in 1969, created in memory of Alfred Nobel by the Swedish National Bank. Though it was not part of Alfred's original will, the category reflected his belief in innovation and progress. As the world changed, the prize evolved as well. New fields grew, old problems found new solutions. Yet one thing remained unchanged: the Nobel Prize continued to honor people, not just for thinking, but for acting in service of humanity. But despite its prestige, the Nobel Prize has not been free from debate. Some prize winners became controversial. Some decisions were questioned. There were moments of disagreement and even disappointment. But that is part of what made the prize important. It provoked discussion. It forced people to ask, what does progress mean? What does peace truly look like? Who deserves to be remembered? Even when people disagreed, the world still cared because the Nobel Prizes had become a symbol of what humanity could accomplish at its best. Today, more than 100 years after Alfred Nobel's death, his legacy lives stronger than ever. Scientists still chase discoveries that may one day earn them a Nobel Prize. Writers pour their hearts into words that may open minds. Leaders and activists work to bring peace to lands broken by war, hoping not for fame, but for change. And every year, when the world hears the names of new laureates announced, people stop for a moment not to argue or divide, but to celebrate knowledge, courage, and humanity. It is powerful to think that all of this began with a single moment, one man reading his own obituary and realizing that he did not want to leave behind a life defined by destruction. He chose a different path, and today millions walk in the light of that decision. But the story is not over yet, because the final question remains: what can we learn from Alfred Nobel's life, and how can his story guide our own? Alfred Nobel's life is more than a historical biography. It is a mirror that reflects the deepest parts of human nature: our brilliance, our flaws, our regrets, and our ability to change. His story is not simply about a man who invented dynamite or the founder of a famous prize. It is about a soul who faced himself honestly and chose redemption over pride. In the end, he proved that the measure of a life is not what we create for ourselves, but what we leave behind for others. As the years passed after his death, the Nobel Prizes continued to grow in influence around the world. But perhaps the most extraordinary part of the Nobel legacy is not found in gold medals or grand ceremonies. It is found in the lives changed by the people who earned them. The Nobel Prize has helped scientists continue their research, doctors cure diseases, writers reach new audiences, and peace builders negotiate in war zones where hope seemed lost. Behind every Nobel announcement, there is a story sometimes simple, sometimes heartbreaking, always human. Think of Mother Teresa, who walked the streets of Kolkata offering comfort to the sick and dying. She received the Nobel Peace Prize not for wealth, not for power, but for compassion. Think of Malala Yousafzai, who at just 17 years old became the youngest Nobel Peace Prize winner in history after surviving an attack for speaking out for girls' education. She showed the world that courage does not depend on age. Think of scientists like Alexander Fleming, who discovered penicillin and saved millions of lives. Or Norman Borlaug, whose agricultural innovations helped feed starving populations across the world. These people did not seek fame. They sought purpose, and in return, they gave hope. There have also been Nobel laureates who sacrificed everything for truth. Writers like Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who revealed the cruelty of Soviet prison camps. Leaders like Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison before becoming a symbol of unity and forgiveness. These people remind us that peace is not the absence of struggle, it is the victory of the human spirit. Yet the Nobel story is not only about heroes, it is also about all of us. Alfred Nobel's great message was not written in his will, it was written in his life. He taught the world that change begins the moment we look honestly at ourselves. He once made a fortune from destruction, then he chose to build a legacy of hope. He had every reason to defend his past, every excuse to blame others, yet he chose responsibility instead. And that made all the difference. We live in a world that often judges quickly and harshly. Mistakes are remembered more than kindness. But Alfred Nobel reminds us that our past does not have to define who we become. At any moment, a single decision can transform a life. Even from the deepest regret, something good can grow. Fate is not written in stone. Legacy is a choice. Every year on December 10th, as the orchestra plays and the world watches Nobel laureates receive their medals, something larger than tradition is being honored. It is a celebration of human potential, a reminder that knowledge is a light that must be shared, a reminder that invention must be balanced with wisdom, a reminder that peace is not a dream, it is a responsibility. In one of his notes, Alfred once wrote, "Good wishes alone will not ensure peace." He believed action mattered more than words. He proved that a single idea inspired by remorse, guided by purpose, and fueled by hope could echo through time. His legacy is not just the Nobel Prize. His legacy is the belief that one person can change the world. As you listen to this story in English today, remember that learning itself is part of Alfred's dream. Every new word you learn, every new idea you explore, every goal you set is a step forward not only for you, but for the world around you. Knowledge is not just power. Knowledge is responsibility. It is a gift we share. So let the story of Alfred Nobel stay with you not only as a lesson in history, but as a lesson in life. No matter where you come from, no matter what mistakes you have made, no matter how heavy your past may feel, you always have the power to begin again. The greatest invention in life is not dynamite, it is purpose. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Learn English with Sara. If you enjoyed this episode and learned something meaningful today, please don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more inspirational English learning stories. And let me know in the comments. What lesson did you learn from Alfred Nobel's life? I would love to hear your thoughts. See you in the next story. Keep learning, keep growing, and never stop believing in your potential.